You can be exhausted all day and still become fully awake the second your head touches the pillow. That is when the day starts talking back. A look, a pause, a sentence you barely noticed at noon suddenly feels louder in the dark. Night turns small moments into unfinished business. You replay what you said, then what they meant, then the part of their face that changed for half a second. And the strange part is this: you are not trying to be dramatic. You are trying to understand what your body still has not set down. Sensitive people often do not carry the day in obvious ways. They carry it as tension in the shoulders, a buzzing mind, and a feeling that something is still open. So even when the room is quiet, their inner world is not. Silence does not always feel restful when your mind has been absorbing more than it had time to process. That is why nighttime can feel less like rest and more like delayed exposure. Everything you moved past during the day quietly returns for review. Not because you are weak, not because you are overthinking for fun, because your system notices more than it can sort in real time, and when the world finally stops demanding your attention, the backlog begins. During the day, you were answering texts, reading faces, adjusting your tone, and tracking the mood in the room. You are functioning, but you are also recording. You notice when someone says they are fine too quickly. You notice when a friend laughs, but their eyes stay heavy. Most of this happens so fast, it does not look like work, but your mind treats it like data anyway. And data asks for storage. It asks for meaning, context, and emotional placement. So later, when the lights are off and no one needs anything from you, your brain finally opens the files. That is when one small interaction becomes 20 minutes of mental replay. You start asking questions you did not have time to ask earlier. Did I sound cold there, or was I just tired? Did they pull away, or am I reading too much into it? Why did that joke feel heavier after I got home? The replay is rarely about the exact words. It is usually about the emotional residue left behind by the moment. Sensitive people often do not struggle because they feel too much in the moment. They struggle because they keep processing long after the moment is over. That is why a short dinner can leave you tired for hours. That is why a normal conversation can follow you into bed. Other people may leave an interaction when it ends. You often leave it in stages. Part of you walks away physically. Another part keeps scanning for what just happened. This is one reason sensitive people are so often called calm when they are actually overloaded. The outside looks steady because the real activity is happening inside. You may smile, nod, and sound composed. Meanwhile, your mind is tracking tone, subtext, body language, timing, and whether the energy in the room just shifted. That kind of awareness has a cost. It creates a hidden form of tiredness that sleep alone does not always fix. Because this is not just physical fatigue, it is awareness fatigue. It is what happens when your mind stays lightly braced for hours. It keeps taking in information that other people filter out without realizing. A sensitive nervous system does not only react to noise, it reacts to emotional texture, unpredictability, and unspoken tension. So if someone across from you is irritated, withdrawn, scattered, or disappointed, you may feel it before you understand it. Your body starts responding before your mind is language. That response can look invisible from the outside. On the inside, it can feel like 1,000 tabs quietly opening. And once those tabs are open, they do not close just because the event ended. They stay active until your mind can sort what mattered and what did not. That sorting often gets pushed to nighttime. Night is when stimulation drops low enough for deeper processing to rise. This is why you can seem fine at the event and drained only after. The exhaustion arrives late because the system was busy holding itself together. A lot of sensitive people know this feeling well. You get home, close the door, and only then realize how hard you were working. Sometimes it happens after a coffee with one person. Sometimes after a grocery store trip, a family dinner, or a work meeting that looked completely normal. Nothing extreme happened, but your mind had to keep adjusting, reading, and managing the atmosphere. That is exhausting in a quiet way. It does not leave obvious evidence, which is why it is so hard to explain. You just know that by evening, your thoughts feel crowded. Even kindness can tire you out when you have been deeply present for too long. And then comes the strange loneliness of nighttime replay. You are finally alone, but your mind is still in other people's company. You hear the conversation again. You re-feel the moment someone went distant, guarded, or slightly misunderstood. You think about the text you sent. You think about whether it sounded warmer in your head than it looked on their screen. You remember the story you told at lunch. Now you are wondering whether you shared too much, too little, or the wrong detail. Sometimes it is not even your own feelings keeping you awake. It is the mood someone else left in you. Sensitive people absorb more than words. They absorb pace, pressure, disappointment, irritation, and the emotional weather around a moment. So you might lie in bed feeling heavy without knowing the feeling is partly borrowed. Your body is still carrying a room you already left. This is why night can feel emotionally louder than day. There are fewer distractions, so what was subtle becomes obvious. The brain also loves unfinished patterns. If something felt uncertain, awkward, or emotionally incomplete, your mind keeps circling it for closure. And sensitivity makes uncertainty feel especially sticky. You do not just want the moment to be over, you want it to make sense. That search for sense can keep running long after your body needs sleep. You are tired, but your awareness is still on duty. This is why bedtime is hard for so many deeply aware people. Rest requires release, and release is difficult when your system still feels responsible. Responsible for understanding people, responsible for not missing something, responsible for catching the emotional shift before it becomes conflict. So even in bed, part of you keeps watch. Not loudly, not dramatically, just faithfully. That quiet vigilance can become such a habit that peace feels unfamiliar at first. When nothing is happening, your mind keeps searching anyway. It scans the day for loose ends. It checks people's reactions for hidden meaning. It revisits a single sentence to see if there was another layer. It reopens a memory because the tone still feels unresolved. This does not mean your mind is broken. It means your mind has been trained by experience to stay alert to subtleties. Maybe you learned early that moods matter. Maybe you became good at reading what was not being said. Maybe being observant helped you stay connected, safe, prepared, or useful. And now your awareness does not shut off just because the day ended. That is why nighttime replay is rarely random. It often follows the very places where your attention has learned to cling. Social ambiguity, emotional mismatch, small disconnection, the feeling that something happened even if nobody named it. You can watch this happen in tiny scenes. A friend answers with a dry tone, and you say it is probably nothing. Hours later, you are brushing your teeth, and suddenly that tone feels important. Now your whole body is awake around a moment you tried to dismiss. Or you leave a meeting feeling mostly fine. Then at midnight you remember one expression from across the table and start replaying everything around it. Or someone you love says goodnight a little differently. Not cold exactly, just different enough for your system to notice. That tiny change follows you into the dark. Now your mind is trying to solve a puzzle your heart already felt. And this is the part many people miss. Sensitive people are not always replaying because they are insecure. Often they are replaying because they are accurate enough to notice that something did shift. The pain comes from not knowing what to do with that accuracy. Well, you can feel more than you can confirm. Your mind gets stuck between intuition and doubt. That is an exhausting place to live. You do not fully trust the signal, but you cannot fully ignore it either. So you keep revisiting the moment, hoping repetition will produce certainty. Most of the time, it only produces more mental noise. And mental noise is one of the least understood forms of exhaustion. You can look completely functional while your inner world is running overtime. This is why sensitive people sometimes wake up tired before the day even starts. The body slept, but the mind stayed busy. It kept sorting, it kept reviewing, it kept trying to finish what the day emotionally left open. That kind of fatigue can make ordinary life feel strangely heavy. Simple plans start to feel expensive before they even happen. Because somewhere in you, there's already an estimate of the recovery cost. Your system knows that an hour outside may require a longer return inward. And that recovery is not indulgence. It is maintenance. Silence helps because silence reduces incoming data. Solitude helps because no one else's mood is landing in your body for a while. Slow evenings help because your mind cannot set things down at the same speed other people pick them up. It needs room to empty gradually. That is why coming home can feel like finally taking off invisible armor. The day may not have looked intense, but your system was still defending its balance. The hard part is that sensitive people often judge themselves for this. They think they should be able to brush things off faster. They compare their inner recovery time to people whose systems simply register less. Then they call themselves difficult for needing more space. But needing more time does not mean you are failing at life. It means your processing is deep, not shallow. Still, depth has to be handled honestly. Sensitivity is not automatically wisdom if it keeps turning into endless self-surveillance. There is a difference between noticing and imprisoning yourself inside what you notice. Nighttime replay crosses that line when observation becomes emotional over work. When every interaction becomes a case file, your peace starts depending on perfect interpretation. And no human mind can actually achieve that. Some things remain unclear. Some people remain unreadable. Some moments never explain themselves fully. Part of maturity for a sensitive person is learning that not every felt signal deserves a full trial at midnight. Some sensations are true, but still incomplete. You may have sensed tension accurately. You may have picked up a shift that was real. But real does not always mean urgent. And noticing something does not always mean you are responsible for solving it tonight. That realization can change everything. It does not make you less sensitive. It makes your sensitivity less punishing. Because the deepest exhaustion is not always caused by feeling. It is often caused by carrying every feeling as a task. And that is what nighttime replay becomes for many people. A private second shift nobody else sees. You lie there doing unpaid emotional labor for every room you entered. You try to make every expression coherent before morning. No wonder your mind feels tired in a way sleep cannot fully touch. You have been living as both participant and processor. The truth is, your sensitivity is not the problem by itself. The problem is how often it has had to operate without enough closure, space, or mercy. You were built to notice nuance. You were not built to endlessly digest the whole world alone. So if nights are hard for you, it does not mean you are fragile. It may mean your inner world has been carrying more detail than anyone ever sees. It may mean you are one of those people who stays composed in real time and pays for it later. One of those people who looks calm while mentally holding a storm. And if that is you, your exhaustion makes sense. Your replay makes sense too. Because when a person is deeply aware, the day does not end when the clock says it ends. It ends when their nervous system finally believes it is safe to stop listening. Until then, the mind keeps the lights on. It keeps replaying voices, glances, and unfinished emotional math. So the next time you are lying awake, revisiting the day in painful detail, remember this. You are not weak for struggling to let go of what other people barely notice. You may simply be someone who feels the hidden weight of ordinary moments, someone whose mind hears echoes long after the room is quiet. And maybe that is the clearest way to say it. Sensitive people replay everything at night because they were never only living the moment. They were also absorbing it, interpreting it, carrying it, and trying to protect themselves inside it. That is why the body gets tired, but the mind is the last thing to sleep.